Sir Jackie Stewart marked your card before the off. He was absolutely spot on. Juan Pablo Montoya wins the Italian Grand Prix. 2 Renault drivers on the podium. World Championship leader Alonso and Fisichella, who was so poor in qualifying. Raikkonen never surged through the field. He missed the podium as well. 4th, Jarno Trulli for Toyota and Ralf Schumacher. I reckon that takes them past 100 points for that team. That's good. Pitsonia, late replacement for the unwell Nick Heidfeld. A couple of points for Williams. He loves that 7th place. And Jenson Button, just a single point for BAR. He would have hoped for a lot more than that. And the drivers' standings, 4 races to go, 27 points. The gap at the top. It means that Fernando Alonso could win the title next weekend at Spa-Francorchamps. Michael Schumacher 3rd. His chances of retaining his title are mathematically gone. In reality, they've been gone for ages. Montoya, 50 points in 4th place. Just a couple between Fisichella and Trulli, the 2 Italians. A decent old battle going on there. Ralf Schumacher 4 ahead of BAR-bound Barrichello. And Nick Heidfeld, who of course did not race today, becalmed on 28 points. Now then, Mark, let me ask you first of all, we spoke extensively before the off about the Kimi Raikkonen surge. Just tell us quite simply why you believe it never happened.
It never happened because Jacques Villeneuve was in the way for far too long, and that's a major problem at the beginning of the race. Kimi Raikkonen had the pace, for sure. I mean, he was the fastest man on the race circuit, but unfortunately the traffic killed him.
I suppose he was carrying a vast amount of fuel as well at the start, wasn't he, Kimi?
Yeah, definitely so. And I think, you know, that would have all played out for him tactically and strategically, but unfortunately that traffic was a major problem. The start here, very clean, going to the first turn. It's not really a big issue for Montoya. He got a great start. I thought the Renault would be a little bit stronger. The bigger problem came a little bit further back in the grid. Raikkonen got a little bit held up, got squeezed out on the chicane there, and we had a big issue with Mark Webber and David Coulthard. Coulthard getting his front wing just knocked away from him.
And that compromised both their races, really, didn't it? And Fisichella, Coulthard and Webber, it was all got very messy down there, and I guess Fisichella would be quite happy. He just about steered clear of it.
He got away with that very nicely, but that concertina effect was costly to a number of the guys.
Jacques Villeneuve, he seemed to nip past Raikkonen. That surprised a lot of people, but once he was past him and getting beyond the world champion, the 97 world champion, well, he just couldn't do it, Raikkonen.
Well, Martin said to Kimi, are you worried about anybody behind? And he should have been worried. He should have been worried about Villeneuve because he just shot by him on the run down to the first chicane. And Kimi was compromised at this point. And, you know, the JV, he drove a great race at the beginning there. Kimi, even though he had a bit more fuel on, he did have a faster car. There was no way of him getting by. That was the end of it for Kimi Raikkonen. Yeah,
Jacques kept him back for a lot of laps. Let us hear from Jacques Villeneuve now. Here he is with Louise Goodman.
Jacques, you played a key role, particularly at the beginning of that race. I mean, great start for you. Raikkonen slipped straight behind you.
Yeah, well, he wasn't, normally I let him by, but he wasn't actually fast, and I didn't want him to be in front of me and block me because I knew we had to pit early and didn't want to lose any time early in the race, so, you know, too bad for him.
Were you surprised that he didn't make more of an effort to try and get past you?
Yeah, but he was never that close. Maybe he was running too heavy. I don't know. I'm not sure what happened.
He finished up 11th in the Grand Prix. Nothing untoward about those tactics against Raikkonen, bearing in mind he's chasing the world title.
No, at the end of the day, Jim, JV is out there with Sauber trying to get the best job he can get done possible, and Kimi had to get by him, and it just didn't happen.
Let's look at the little tussle between Alonso and Raikkonen. They haven't been wheel to wheel that often this season, and it was good to see Kimi staying out so long, of course, didn't he, on that first stint.
Well, Kimi stayed out for an awful long time, and that just showed how good his qualifying lap was. But the big tussle came in the race there when the pair of them got together. You see there Alonso coming out from the pit lane. Raikkonen stuck behind him then. He's got to make some decisions fast. And, of course, he's running with a bit less fuel on board, and he should have a much faster car. Alonso's positioning himself well. I don't think Fernando's that too concerned about Kimi coming by at the end of the day. He's an old head on young shoulders. He knew what he had to do. Just sit tight and get the points collected. Kimi's all over the backside of him. It was an inevitable situation. He was going to go by it. Clean move on the outside. But Alonso's not worried.
He's a lot of savvy, Fernando Alonso. And we see him in situations like that throughout the season. And he plays the long game, doesn't he?
He's a calculated driver, and he doesn't get kerfuffled about anything. I mean, the guy's just super calm.
That fuel load, though, that Kimi had on the lap yesterday in qualifying, unbelievable.
Well, it sets a benchmark, I think, and that would also set a benchmark for Montoya because he knows how quick Kimi Raikkonen is as a teammate.
Just expand on that theory, Mark, that you think that the level of fuel that Kimi Raikkonen had on board for so long might just have affected that rear tyre that delaminated.
Well, I think that's a possibility, and it's backed up slightly with Montoya's tyre given away. I don't personally feel that it was a puncture. If it would have been a puncture, I think they'd have pulled the guy in, with telemetry information from the pits. But I think it's delamination.
Sure, so it was that tyre that obviously affected Kimi Raikkonen. We looked at it and people said it was a puncture. You're absolutely convinced, though, it's delamination, yeah?
I'm kind of...
It's tough to say, I know.
I'm convinced by it, but we'll have to see whether that's the case from Michelin. They will analyse this tyre. They will look for the pieces off the circuit, Jim, and put everything together and see whether they can get something confirmed.
Okay, I think Martin Whitmarsh is just here. If you just take a little step back, come on in, Martin, and I know you're technical enough to use the microphone, aren't you?
That's right.
we're talking really about Kimi's race, and we're wondering why first of all, why the early surge didn't materialise. We're all looking for him to carve through the field.
Well, I think we expected him to take a few cars at the start. I think it got fairly tight and compact, and I think it was difficult to find his way forward. And here he knew he had the pace, and if he made a lunge, lost the front wing, then it's really game over. And he had to really bide his time. I think that was a tremendously mature approach that he took. And he knew, when he got into some clean air, he was going to be the fastest car out there, and he had to just find the way through as the field opened up, as the strategy opened up. We determined that clearly we could one-stop. Ultimately, of course, it didn't turn out quite that way.
Is that what you're looking to do, to one-stop today?
Yeah, because we realised yesterday, given the penalty that Kimi had incurred, the right thing for us to do. We had the pace. It was phenomenal drive when you think about it, to one-stop a car, put all that fuel in prior to qualifying, and then go out there and be so dominant and be on pole.
We've just said that with Mark there. What about Jacques Villeneuve holding him up in the early stages? How frustrating was that for you?
Deeply. You have all sorts of emotions, obviously, but in fairness, Jacques is there, he's racing, and you say, well, what does this mean to Jacques? He's just getting in the way, but he's there. We put ourselves in that position. He is entitled to do that. Of course, it was deeply frustrating. I'm sure he got called all sorts of names on the pit wall, but the reality is that he was entitled to do it. And obviously we lost a bit of time there, but we always believed that providing we stayed calm, Kimi just carried on pushing. When he got the opportunity, pushed harder and faster than anyone else, he could come through the field.
There's so much to talk to you about. That spin, do you think it cost him the podium?
Yes, I think it does. So unfortunately did the tyre incident. He was, on our strategy, he was going to be a very comfortable third. We then had a tyre problem that put us back, but he was, where anyone could see, absolutely determined. He was attacking, and I felt that he was going to get past and get onto the podium again. But we didn't set out to make the race that exciting. I can tell you, all of us, we were a much calmer race. But what happened with Kimi throughout the race, and then with Juan Pablo at the end, we mustn't forget what a fantastic job he did today as well.
I know it's really hard straight after the end of a Grand Prix, but the reasons for what happened to those tyres, both to Kimi's tyres and to Juan Pablo's tyres, people are saying puncture, others are saying delamination.
No, it was delamination. They weren't punctured. We know that. We knew that instantaneously. We have data. We have sensors on the car. But they happened on both of our cars. And you can, is it the tyre? Is it the car? I think all we can say is the Michelin tyres on our car appeared to have that problem. Whether it's a batch issue, whether it's something we were doing, we'd run that tyre with that setup here for 20 laps. It previously was very safe. We had a problem today, which was very unfortunate.
How much of a gamble was it, Juan Pablo Montoya keeping going in those last laps? Bearing in mind what happened to Kimi at the Nürburgring as well.
It's a big gamble, slightly different in that in this case he hadn't flat spotted. We didn't have all those loads
just
going.
Seeing Kimi at the Nürburgring, they're pictures you probably don't want to see, so you carry on talking.
But in this particular case, he didn't have a flat spot. We weren't fatiguing the suspension, which is what happened. But obviously you're worried about tyre integrity, and all of us were very, very tense. It takes a very brave driver to realise he's a very determined Alonso. Absolutely. Bearing down. We eased up in the long left-handers and just said take it easy through those corners. But when you say take it easy, you must realise how fast these cars are going down the straight. The huge centrifugal loads on the tyres.
I realise.
And it's a very, very brave, focused guy.
Two questions before you leave us. An evaluation of Juan Pablo's racing weekend, pole and the win.
Juan Pablo didn't do anything wrong. He communicated, he was fast, did a fantastic job, and we know he can do that. He's really come from strength to strength. And a lot of people at the beginning of the year were questioning our judgment, questioning him. I think he's come through tremendously strong teammate. At least he was there to minimise the damage when we fell over with Kimi, and he's a tremendously committed, fast driver.
And Is it Alonso's championship now, the drivers?
Well, as we saw today, anything can happen in motor racing, and we've had an exciting race. We're going to have 4 more exciting races. We're going to go there determined to win them. And Fernando and Ferrari and Renault are doing a fantastic job, but I think we can beat them. We can beat them in all of those races. Perhaps we need them to have a bit of bad luck. We've got to make sure we're consistent, we're finishing and we're winning. And who knows, we're not giving up. Kimi's not giving up. We're going to try and win both championships.
It's not over until it's over. Martin, we appreciate you joining us on ITV F1. You've illuminated some sort of dark areas of the race for us. We appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
We will be right back to hear from the top 3 in the press conference.
Juan Pablo, it looked to be relatively straightforward until those closing laps, but before we get into those, let's just talk through the first phase of the race with Fernando right on your tail there.
Well, the first few laps I pushed really hard and I opened a gap, and then I felt quite comfortable. We thought we were going longer than them, so it was a matter of just maintaining the gap. And then the car became quite oversteery, and we, you got a lot of adjustment in the car. I worked with it a little bit, but I never really felt comfortable with it to be able to push hard. So it was like one lap you could suddenly push, the next lap it would go really bad. But generally it went pretty good. But when we got to the end of the race, when I could see the tire, breaking up a little bit on the left, but at the end it just went really bad. There was just no grip.
So how did you go into those closing laps? How can you drive the car that way, bearing in mind, of course, the problems Kimi had earlier in the year and the problem Kimi had in the race today, also with the tire?
Yeah, the thing is, you couldn't really lean on the car or anything. It was like, go as slow as you can. So I, brought back, I turned down the engine before that, so I brought it back up, like full power and everything, and I think that helped me a little bit. And I was kind of calculating, but I couldn't go any quicker, to be honest. Any quicker was a big risk to go off. So, when I had like 4 seconds, 2 laps to go, I said it should be okay,
But you did it, and of course this was the scene of your first ever Grand Prix win as well. Emotional day for you.
Yeah, it's nice. First time I won here, I couldn't put any champagne down, so it's nice to do it here, to be honest. It's nice, it's good for me for the championship, and I think we only took a point of Renault here, but it's better than nothing.
Congratulations to you. Fernando, you raced him long and hard in the early phase of the race there. Then the pit stops came. It looked as if you had a slowish outlap.
Yes, I felt very bad grip going out of the pits. Maybe the tires were a little bit dirty in the concrete, and maybe the first lap was not ready. And I think I got penalized a little bit for this. And the first laps after the pit stops, I lost a little bit of time. But I was lucky that I was not fighting with anyone, so I took the race quite easy.
Well, a great result for you in terms of the championship, a very strong second place, but not far away from Juan Pablo in those closing laps. Yeah,
at the end, the team informed me about the tire problem that Juan Pablo was taking, and I think, I pushed a little bit more as Juan Pablo. We turned the engine up again, full power, and tried to put some pressure, but maybe it was too late. But for us, second place is good. The target for the last 6 or 7 races was to be in the podium, and I'm constantly in the podium, and sometimes in front of Kimi, so it's okay for me.
Congratulations. And to your teammate Giancarlo Fisichella, great drive from where you qualified yesterday, Giancarlo. Look back, first of all, at that qualifying lap. Shame it perhaps wasn't cleaner if you'd started a little bit higher up the grid.
Yeah, unfortunately yesterday I had a problem in braking for turn 1. I had a problem with the retardation and I couldn't stop the car. I lost more than 6 tenths over there. So today was a bit difficult race for me, starting from the 8th position. But generally the car balance was good. Just the grip level was really poor and was really difficult. But the strategy was perfect. I had no problem in the pit stop. So today has been a good day for me, and I'm able to achieve a good 3rd position, which is what I expect for this race.
Well, as it turned out, of course, you were running a lot more fuel than the guys just ahead of you in the early phase of the race. Were you aware of that at the time? Did you know that the pit stops were going to help you as much as they did?
Well, yeah, we know more or less the fuel load compared to other people we had. We were quite optimistic to have much more fuel than the 2 BARs and the 2 Ferraris. I was a little bit worrying about Jarno's fuel, and in fact it was one lap before me. But in that lap, I overtook him, and I went through the end in a third position.
Congratulations, great to see you on the podium again. Juan Pablo, turning to you, this was the first Grand Prix since the Dutch Grand Prix 1961 with no mechanical retirements. On this sort of circuit, relatively quick lap, I guess the traffic must have been horrendous.
Yeah, traffic was really, it was really bad. Most of the people moved out of the way pretty quickly. I was a bit concerned right before my last stop. I had like 4 cars ahead of me, and I thought, oh no. And they just told me Fernando pitted, so you never know how much time you're going to lose. And I lost about a second, that it wasn't so bad. I think it was good enough that we managed to open a gap on Fernando on that stunt.
He is nifty through the traffic. He's not a bad mover with his pram as well. He's very much a family man, Juan Pablo Montoya, in the paddock these days. Wife Connie, and on the left there, and baby Sebastian enjoying Dad's triumph at Monza. I want to talk to you about a fellow who's still searching for a Grand Prix triumph. Jenson Button, high hopes before the race, but once again the BAR faded away when it mattered.
I have to say it's disappointing, because I thought Jenson would be on for a podium. They seem to have the pace in qualifying, but when it comes to the race, it just can't get it all together. Both Sato and Jenson Button falling way back down the field.
Fair play to Sato, he had a refueling problem, but Jenson's slightly mysterious what happened to him in this Grand Prix.
Yeah, even more mysterious when you listen to Nick Fry during the race, and he seemed to feel that there was no problems there, but clearly there must have been something wrong, because the outright performance at the end of that race was disappointing.
Let's have a word with the team who had 2 on the podium. Renault, and it's Pat Simmons.
Well, Pat, second's not bad, but how worried were you when you saw Raikkonen was 1 stopping?
Pretty worried. It was a difficult race to manage all the way through. I'm not saying I knew Raikkonen was going to 1 stop, but I knew there was a chance he might, and it looked good. I think that our calculations showed that Fernando could hold him off, but I think Giancarlo, it would have been very difficult without Raikkonen's problem, but that's racing.
And when you saw Montoya in trouble with his tyre at the end, did you tell Fernando to push even harder?
Yeah, for sure. We kept the pressure up there. I'm sure a couple more laps might have been a different story.
What did those tyre failures look like to you?
Well, they're not tyre failures.
What Kimi's was?
No, I don't think so. I think it's tyre damage. The tyre hadn't deflated, it hadn't lost air. I suspect it's suspension settings. It looked like the outside of the tyre tread area that was getting the damage, so I guess it's the way the car's set up.
Thanks, Pat.
The Constructors' Championship is so important to them all, and actually McLaren have gained a point in that on Renault. 144 plays 136. I guess Toyota, the way they are going, they might just think they can pull back those 12 points on Ferrari in the last 4 races of the season. BMW Williams are looking good for 5th, and Red Bull a couple ahead of BAR Honda. Sauber 8th, Jordan 9th, and Minardi 10th. Giancarlo Fisichella had a few very dark looks cast his way after he messed things up in qualifying, but he came good when it matters in the Grand Prix himself.
I think he did a tremendous job. He drove very calmly and collectedly, but at the end of the day, he's still not getting in there where he needs to be, and that's winning Grand Prix. We saw him win a Grand Prix at the beginning of this season. He's very much playing the bridesmaid in the backup role now to Alonso, but if that's what the team's requested, then fair play.
They are very much team players in that Renault team. And let's have a word with David Coulthard. His race compromised by what happened to him right at the start.
David, it all went downhill with that tap at the start, didn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately I made it round turn 1 okay, but just in the sort of concertina effect into the second part of the first chicane, then I touched the back of Fisichella and broke the front right part of the front wing.
Thereafter, you and Mark Webber seem to be spending a lot of time together.
Yeah, I think Mark lost his wing on the first lap as well. So, our strategy reverted, and we were able to stay in front of him at the stops. But unfortunately, I ran wide at the first Lesmo, and he was able to get through and pull away.
Anything to report for you after that?
The front barge board is jammed between the wishbone, and that'll explain why the car felt like it was tracking so much in the straight line. It felt to me like it had a puncture, but now I've jumped out, I can see what the problem is.
Thanks, David.
David Coulthard, the last British winner here at Monza back in '97, I believe that was. Michael Schumacher's won here 4 times, but mathematically and everything else here at Monza, the curtain has come down on his World Championship.
Yeah, I think this is the end of the road now for Schumacher having any hint of a World Championship for this season. And you can see with Ferrari, the performance has dropped off all year long. They haven't made the gains like the other teams on the grid. It's over.
James talked about Ferrari using the R word, retire, for the first time. We have chatted about this before, I know. Are you expecting him to be here next season?
I expect him to be here. I think there's a lot more to go on yet. Ferrari, of course, now talking about different drivers. We've heard Ross Brawn mention Rossi. We've heard him mention Raikkonen. But don't discount the fact that Michael Schumacher will be about in a Ferrari. That will be the case next year.
But a big rebuilding job, really, for Ferrari in the meantime, with Rubens Barrichello going and Felipe Massa coming from Sauber to replace him.
Yeah, very much so. They've got a new guy in town now. Barrichello's off, Massa's in, young guy. He is the future of Ferrari, but I'm not so sure he'll be there for that long.
Let's just talk about the championship. I mean, he could do it next weekend at Spa-Francorchamps, Fernando Alonso. He's led for so long. There is no real doubt he does deserve it this time around.
Well, I think he does deserve it. I think he's driven a tremendous season. But at the end of the day, I think also Renault have given him the package to do the job, and that's an important factor.
And he has delivered. A quick word before we leave you with Jenson Button.
Well, indeed, time for a quick word with Jenson. What happened there then?
Well, the whole weekend we struggled really, except for qualifying. I know we were a bit short on fuel, but even so, it wasn't too bad a lap by Taku and myself. But really, this is a really difficult circuit for us. We've really struggled here with the low downforce aero package on the car. Maybe we just haven't worked hard enough on it. But hopefully when we get back to a higher downforce circuit, which is the next 4, we'll be back on the pace again. So really, a point isn't so bad.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks to Jenson Button. He will have better days, I'm sure. I must point you towards the Big Fight Live. It's back on ITV1 screens next Saturday, 10:30. We have a Joe Calzaghe, the long-time world super middleweight champion. Joe Calzaghe topping the bill in Cardiff, and Amir Khan also has his second professional fight, 10:30 ITV1 next Saturday night. Back to tonight, we'll have more Monza reaction in our highlight show round about midnight. And next weekend, Angus Scott is your host at Spa-Francorchamps. Normal times, qualifying from 11:30 on the Saturday, pre-race show at 12 noon, and the highlights around midnight. Well, despite Montoya's committed victory, it is Fernando Alonso who can put the champagne on ice after his performance here at Monza. Cheerio.
F1 and ITV, sponsored by LG. If you'd like to know more about Formula One, the website sponsored by LG is itv.com/F1.